what I think we would like to see and what we believe in, it's really not rocket science. And there's a lot of research to support what our beliefs are. But I think one of the fundamental things is to make it very clear from the get-go what your core values are. Like, what are the things that you stand for from a decision-making standpoint? How do you make those decisions? And I think it's incredibly important that you are very upfront with all of that information. And then as you are designing, whether it's a strategic plan and or a budget or anything else, you are very clear with the thoughts and the processes that are in place moving forward. And I think if you do that, I think then, of course, trust is there. Not everybody, but as long as you have the majority of the people who trust you. And of course, you have to walk the walk. Like, whatever you're saying that you believe in, you have to emulate in many ways and model those things. And you have to be consistent, so you can't just say it one year and then not do it the next year. You have to keep doing it. And so I've been very fortunate, but as I transition to a new school district now where I am, I had to do it all over again.
Yeah.
And in some ways it's easier, and in many ways it's actually harder to
Mhm.
do, because every community is very different as far as what they would like to see, right? So you have to do it all over again and think of how important those things are. Now, you do this now in the middle of a pandemic in your first year, it makes it that much more tricky. But again, fundamentally, I talk about the inner journey that every educator has to take, and especially school leaders. You have to know what makes you tick. You have to know what hills you want to die on. You have to know what you think from a principal standpoint, principal LE standpoint, that is really important to you. And until you do that, I don't know how you can do this kind of work.
Well, as I was saying earlier in the introduction, with you being a superintendent in New York and you being a speaker, uh, does that help when you go into an organization you're about to lead and they know already who you are and your thought process, the thought leaders you follow, and what you're going to be bringing to the district? I always believe that superintendents should be staff developers.
Yeah.
They should be stakeholder developers. They should be very growth oriented. So with them, with you coming into this new district in New York, did your history of being a communicator, doing your TED Talk, being very visible with your belief system, did that help or did that hinder your relationships as you were establishing them?
I would say I think it helped more than it hindered, but clearly when one draws a line in the sand, there are people on the other side of that, right? And so I knew that coming in here, and I think it's important that people understand what somebody's philosophy is when they come in. I mean, clearly the board, when they hired me, knew, I would like to think, what they were getting. They wanted somebody who really believed in a whole child approach, which I have been and many others have been talking about for years. But not only that, but what does that look like within the school system? Clearly, if you want somebody who's going to come in to potentially not change everything, but to tweak, to shift, we say this all the time, right? It's very hard to change your own mind, but it's almost impossible to change somebody else's mind, right? And the way that you go about doing that is again looking at what you have, looking at where you want to be, and developing a plan and having people come on board. And I was very clear, with our wonderful Board of Education and with our community. That's what we need to do. I think I don't know if you find this, Dr. Lisa, but I do. And again, I'm hyper generalizing. I think there are a lot of school districts out there who don't have a real vision or a mission or have clearly defined their core values. So they try to get to the end of the week, to the end of the month, to the end of the year, and they rinse and repeat it, and they're in the same place again, right? So, in order for someone not to want to be that way and to bring someone in, I think it's a lot of work. And so clearly, if people know where you operate from, I think that's a good thing. But you always have people pushing back, and you have to welcome that. And I tried it to the best of my ability as I advance in my age here, to try to be as open as I can be to other perspectives. Even though I believe something 5 or 10 years ago, you have to reserve the right to change your mind and to be open to other things. And I think as I've aged, I've been more prone to do that.
Well, you have an amazing talk where you talk about your successful education model being PEAS, physical, emotional, academic, and social for children. That's the model. So with this COVID, let me ask you a COVID situation.
Sure.
So now all of the schools are completely, we're having to all revamp and adjust according to what's happened with the pandemic.
Yeah.
Do you see this as an opportunity to move closer to that philosophy, or do you see that this creating more challenges?
Not to take a safe answer, but I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's an opportunity, and what we make of that opportunity is, I think, up to the school district or the leaders within that school district for sure. I think it's incredibly important that we think of different ways of reaching kids. You know, I think for some kids, and we can talk to them, the ones who have been marginalized within our schools, they are flourishing now, you know, with this type of system and model at home, if and when they have the technology. Oh, can you see me? I can't hear you. I think you might be muted. Hold on. I can't hear you.
How's
I'm
this
sorry.
now?
That's it. I got it now.
Okay, good. Sorry, guys who are watching. Usually, when this converts, that if that happens, if we lose signal, it comes back. So those of you, if we just messed up, Dr. Michael Hynes is talking about, you know, how we are growing, how we're utilizing this time with COVID as an opportunity. That's what he's in the middle of talking about.
Yeah, so I mean, right now there are lots of opportunities, not only to expand, I think, the skill sets of our teachers in regard to technology and to working in a somewhat different modality. I think to individualize more than what we have done in the past when it comes to kids and looking at growth and connection, and not just content area stuff, but I think project-based learning. I think there's a lot of opportunities to really grow in that area for sure. But as I was saying before, and I don't know if I'm reiterating this, my apologies, but I think it still warrants it nonetheless, is that the mental health aspect, the social and emotional growth that I think may potentially have been stunted during this time, we have to be prepared for that. I think there is a lot of anxiety. I think there's a lot of stress, toxic stress that's taking place right now, and we have to be prepared for that when our kids come back. And I think it's always been there. I've always spoken about the fact that, you know, mental health and wellness is something that schools never paid enough attention to.
Right.
And so I think the upside of all of this is that we can now begin to really start to hyper focus on it, because it's more warranted than ever before.
One of the things that I do with schools is talk a lot about creating a captivating culture. And one of the things, one of the points within that with the children is finding a way to preserve childhood. Our kids are being forced to grow up way too fast, with so many responsibilities that we just never would imagine. And then also, we talk a lot about, you talk a lot about teaching children how to navigate their emotions and the social and emotional. Now, we know that there are so many great thought leaders in that area that communicate about it, but they're not forced, they're not put in a situation with the gravity and the number of children that you and I have had under our leadership.
Yeah.
How have you addressed that on the front lines to meet the needs of the kids, and how do you plan on doing it, or what are you thinking along these lines because of what's just happened with the pandemic?
Yeah, so I could speak to my previous school district. What we've done, we created yoga rooms, meditation, mindfulness rooms for kids to really recalibrate. I like to use the word recalibrate. It's
Hmm.
like sometimes when things are broken, all you got to do is unplug it and plug it back in, and it recalibrates and it works again.
Just like
Sometimes
just now, what we just had
that's
was
right. That's
recalibrating.
right. We absolutely. And so to teach children how to recalibrate once they have I call them like an emotional solar flare, right? We all have them throughout the day, but does it hijack you for the rest of the day or for half of the day? And I think the more that we can teach kids how to do that, which is to learn how to breathe, to learn how to take that inner journey, and to learn to be more connected to themselves, the more they'll be primed to learn when they are in the classroom. I think that's incredibly important, those skill sets. So we embedded that throughout our system in my previous school district, and it really worked well. And we also coupled that with lots of play opportunities. So whether it be at a before school play club
Yes.
every Friday, which is incredibly important. And I worked with Dr. Peter Gray, who I hold in the highest regard out of Boston College. And basically, he believes in mixed age play. Fifth graders can play with kindergartners, and they'll
Mhm.
survive. I mean, we did it growing up when
Yeah.
years and years ago, and that's where the real learning takes place. So, that locus of control. How do we teach kids to control what they can control and not to worry so much about what they can't? To have control in their lives, because that's where people get very anxious when they start focusing on the things that they can't control, or have influence over. That to me is just as, if not more important than what potentially takes place in the classroom. Because these are lifelong skills that will serve us well for the rest of our lives. So you have to create those opportunities, but you have to have a board of education that's behind it, a community that's behind it. You can't
Yeah.
just snap your fingers and just make it happen. And the teachers have to be behind it, and the administrators. So, there are all these different processes that you have to put in place. But it does come down to your first question, which is, who are you? What do you stand for? And what are your core values? And how do you make that happen within a school system?
Hmm. Putting the systems together. When I grew up in a little railroad town in Kentucky, the very top of northern Kentucky, a little city called Ludlow. And we went to the same school, K to 12. And there was a playground right next to our school along the riverbank. And everybody went there for recess or went out for recess. And that was very typical. And the teacher had the luxury, if she saw the kids needing a break, well, we're going to go outside. And that was normal. We had all of the specials. And then when I was a teacher myself, when you are a new teacher in a large urban district, what happens is you get bumped around based on the amount of enrollment in a school, right?
Wow.
So
Yeah.
you couldn't get really connected with that community. You would be there a year, and even that, then all of a sudden you'd be at another school, then you'd be, and the same thing happened to assistant principals, and it happened to principals,
That's tough.
because it all navigate, and you couldn't really buy into a community. So um, later on, I ended up starting a series of my own schools, and one of the things that I tried to create is that situation, because I was then in control somewhat of being able to create that vision. And one of the things I like to say is about preserving childhood. So you've been around now. What are your favorite things that you remember that and I understand that you have a little girl, right? Do you have a daughter?
I have 5 kids, yeah, but
Oh, okay.
I got two little ones.
Okay.
At one point, Piaget, I always say this, Piaget would have been very proud. They were in all 4 stages, my kids at one point. But my 2 youngest are 7 and 4, which keeps you very young. But you talk about preserving childhood. That is the essence of childhood, right? Watching a 4-year-old figure things out and ask questions and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you find when you are leading your schools that you're thinking about what you want for your children,
Oh
and then
boy.
you're bringing that in? Because that's exactly the best leaders.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is definitely one. We talk about optics and the lens that we see things through. That is certainly one of them. And one of my daughters, I think has Down syndrome, has special needs.
Hmm.
And so with that, that's another lens that you see things through, right? So, because we talk about schools for everyone, we need to think about everything that a child experiences and needs and deserves. So how do you design something with that in mind? And yeah, I think it's an incredibly important perspective to have.
I love that. How do you design something with that in mind? Yes, I love that. And essentially, that's what I've given my life to, is help people build their vision around these very ideas, because they get so busy with the bureaucracy and with the challenges of the role. You have so many things spreading you so thin as an educational leader. How do you keep yourself grounded
Yeah, boy.
and prioritizing?
Absolutely. It's funny because I know we were just talking offline. I just came out with a book called Staying Grounded.
You did? I missed that one. Okay.
Oh, it's okay. No. I only mentioned that because you asked the question. I wasn't going to
Okay.
bring up. I wasn't going to bring it up, but I will say this: it's about how do you stay grounded during just being a school leader. You have to be very deliberate about it. Like, you have to think of things every single day that you embed in your calendar, that you control, that keep you grounded, and or from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed. And so I have routines that I do every morning. I want to bore you with them, but I think it's really important that you set the stage for the day, that you take time for yourself to get you in the place where you need to be before you go to work. And then it's the same thing. Once you're at work, you do a few different things. And when you retire for the evening, you do some things as well. And what that does is it keeps you grounded, it keeps you recharged, and because you know what it's like better than anybody.
Yeah.
There's an ebb and flow to a school year, right?
Yes.
Sometimes it's like, all right, yeah, I think I could do this. And then sometimes everything comes at you. It's not even fifth gear, it's in 10th gear, like
Hmm.
right now with budget season and the pandemic and everything else. So yeah, you have to be very deliberate with your time, and you have to be selfish in many ways, where you have to focus on you for a small part of the day. It's like your vitamin B12 shot, and then you're ready to do what you need to do.
And that's exactly why I am giving my life to what I'm giving, is to help people like you come alongside and to share in that burden and carry it, because there is absolutely an impossibility to your role without having those support systems and structures from other people who are experts. You can get people to do things, but do they know what they're doing? And do they have your best interest and the children's best interests and your staff members' best interest at heart? That's very, very rare. So I really appreciate you sharing your book, and I hope you don't mind if I steal from it and if
Oh,
I share
please.
your link, because that is excellent. Um, so what would you say to those folks right now? Right now, everybody that is getting this, other than just those who happenstance on YouTube, this is a group of educational leaders across the nation, and many of them have totally been flattened by this COVID-19. Many of them operate in rural school systems, so they had no remote learning.
Yep.
And as you know, remote learning was no picnic for the teachers, because they had a whole lot more work than they normally would. So what would you say to them about the future of education? What would you say that they can hope in?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and it's such a simple question. But I think there are a couple different edges to the way I'll attempt to answer this. One is, it's very easy right now, especially in New York where we are, where it's the epicenter in many ways. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to explain how life has really changed in this area, and I know it's changed in so many areas. But I go back to the song, one of my favorite songs from George Harrison, which is "All Things Must Pass," right? So when we're mired in something and we're knee deep in it, we think it's going to last forever, but it won't. This will end at some point, and it may come back at some point. But I think there are a lot of lessons that we can learn, not only about ourselves internally, but about our systems within that we are residing and working and serving, right? So I think what it has done is I'm trying to think of the lessons learned now, learn from them, and then design something at the same time. And that's a trick, right? It's you're closing out a school year and you're thinking about the opening of a school year all at the same time, while trying to pass a budget, while trying to do all these other things, right?
Right.
But you have to take this for what it is. It's the ultimate learning lesson. And the lessons that I have learned, I think, is nobody's going to care about your remote learning plan this year, 1 year from now. They're not going to go back and go, how come it was only this amount of time as opposed to that amount of time?
Yeah.
I think what they'll think of is, how were you there for kids? How were you there for parents? What structures have you put in place since it happened to augment what's taking place? And how are you going to create those supports for the people that need them the most? Whether it's your staff, whether it's your students, or whether it's your community. And those are the things that we are grappling with right now. And I think you have to embrace the fact that there are so many uncertainties. I think in many ways, when we don't know an answer to something, there's like a vacuum, and we like to fill that vacuum with the worst case scenario, right? It's like we go right to the negative in many ways. I think it's part of the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the learning, as far as what we're thinking about next year, is that it'll be a hybrid model, most likely, when we return. Meaning that, we'll have probably some students who are entering our schools, and then there will be some students who don't, and we have to design systems that will cater to both. And how do you do that with the budget that you have? You have to bring stakeholders on board to help design that. But ultimately, in the end, I think we can be all the better for this, because if we don't come out better after all of this, then it was all wasted time. And that's the ultimate sin, I think, in all of this. So
And I
for
think
us,
a lot of what we missed was standardized testing, and that does not hurt us at all.
at all,
So
we lived,
ridiculous.
like our kids survived, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, our teachers are they know how our kids are doing. We don't need a one-shot deal to tell us how our kids are doing and then rank and sort our kids
No.
or our schools based on that information. No. But I think, like I said before, the project-based learning, problem-based learning opportunities that will come from this, I think, will be significant if we choose to move in that direction. There are many ways that some things that we wish for, that we hope could happen, but we couldn't happen because of the mandates and everything else. I think what we'll find is we will have a lot more control over the things that we want as we move forward, if we want them, and you want to put the energy behind doing it.
Thank you, Michael. Everybody, this has been Dr. Michael Hynes from New York, a superintendent, an amazing educational leader who is on the front lines, just really doing it, and yet finding a way to stay grounded. And I'm going to share a link to his book and a link to his LinkedIn so that you can look at his TED Talks. You can find him on the YouTube channel, and he's got some amazing content there. So thank you so much for giving us your time. This is Dr. Lisa with Educators Circle, for educators who love their work and want to get better.